Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the panel. The title is Auditing Your Business's Digital Hygiene. My name is Ross Ford. I'm the Senior Manager of Operations for A2IM. I'm here with my lovely panelists here. Nate Beck with Pretzelaux, Ahuvah, Berger-Burcat with Revelator, and Franklin Winokur with mTheory. Today we wanted to go over a couple just security concerns. We wanted to talk about all kinds of things, phishing attacks. There's all kinds of stuff on the topic. So without further ado, I'll let each one of our panelists introduce themselves. I'll start with Nate.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Nate Beck. I founded a company called Pretzelaux, which was a streaming music DSP for, still to this day, the only way to license and get your music monetized on Twitch. And then that company was sold to another company called SongTrader. That was about a year ago. And I am now the global head of technology for SongTrader Group.
I'm Ahuvah Berger-Burcat. I am the director of marketing at Revelator, where we have a suite of products that help record labels and distributors manage their businesses from supply chain, analytics, reporting, business intelligence, and Web3 tools to get assets on the blockchain. I have 10 years of history working in cybersecurity, which is how I got invited to join this panel. I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Hi, my name is Franklin Winokur. I work at a company called mTheory. mTheory does a few different things, but we do have an independent record label. My task when joining mTheory was kind of building a data warehouse for all of the information we were collecting for DSPs for the purposes of reporting out to our artists. So I built that data pipeline, and then as kind of one of the only technical folks at mTheory, I also got tasked with a lot of the IT administration. So I've had to think about security and kind of how to implement best practices at our organization, given kind of how we're set up.
Great. Well, thank you for everybody. So, when we think about I guess digital hygiene, it covers quite a bit. We wanted to kind of break down the conversation into a couple pieces. We wanted to go ahead and identify threats. We'll start out with identifying some threats. We'll share some experiences. We need to identify how to react to these threats, and then also just best practices, and maybe we'll share some resources. So let's go ahead and start. Let's go ahead and identify some of the security threats that we are currently facing. What are, I'd say, maybe some of the bigger, I guess, buzzword threats that we're seeing right now?
Yeah, so, there's a whole checklist of just general top-level kind of ways people scam other people into giving up information. The most common way for it to happen is, someone convincing you to give you information. So that's generally called social engineering. Phishing scams, emails, junk email, text messages are a big one of it right now. There's malicious apps, malware. There's a whole bunch of stuff. Social engineering is kind of the bigger one where somebody calls your phone and says, "Hey, I'm with the fire department. Do you want to donate some money? Please give me your credit card number over the phone." And then you do. And then, next thing you know, your account's been emptied. So
right.
There's kind of, those are I don't know how much we need to get into the actual kind of general practices of those kinds of things.
Yeah, I think when we think about it, I think that we've been subject to those types of targeted threats, certainly a fair amount. Mm-hmm. I think the other thing that we've kind of had to combat against just by instilling good practices is really these situations where your password gets compromised through no fault of your own. Some service is storing your password in clear text, and they get compromised, and all of a sudden, if you are using that password in multiple locations, you're the subject of an attack. So there's a lot of situations where I think that even when you're not targeted, you become compromised, and so we're trying to figure out ways to kind of prevent that as well.
So I would just start with passwords. The best practice for passwords is actually using two relevant words. or two words that you're familiar with and putting them together with a number and a symbol, and that usually is really hard to hack. So that's a good practice for suggesting your team members. Number two is always having unique passwords for every account that you have, which is a pain in the ass. But how you can manage that is we're talking about password managers like LastPass.
Yeah.
Or there are other ones. I use LastPass.
One password.
password,
Yeah.
And in there, they also have business accounts where you can set it up and share accounts with your team members, and they can't see the passwords. So they can log in, and it's safe and it's secure. And if and when those team members also leave the organization, you can obviously retract your access to that password. So you know that only the right people at the right time have access to the accounts, and you don't have to keep track of it. You don't have to worry when you have team members who leave the organization and they leave with the passwords, and you're like, how do I get into this account? I don't have it anymore. Yeah. It's all stored and it's owned by the organization, which is really important because it's corporate property.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. And when you do, the password managers are really great because there are situations where like a memorable password is really good when you're kind of putting two words together. Password managers have really secure password generators where they'll just come up with gibberish, a mixture of characters, and that also can be super effective at creating strong passwords, and you don't have to think about it.
Right.
You don't even have to think, which is kind of the beauty of it.
I have a friend of mine on his developer laptop was stolen, like physically, stolen. He left it on a train, or it was taken from a train, or one of these things. And so it was very clearly taken away. But he actually, as one of the things he had on his machine, is he actually had like a reverse tunnel that he used to like connect to his computer when he was like doing web development and stuff like that. So he actually had full access. It came online, and he saw that it was online, and so whoever had stolen his laptop, he had this. And funny enough, so he installed a keylogger and a bunch of other stuff backwards on his own machine, and he was thwarted by a password manager. The person who stole his laptop had installed a password manager.
Yeah.
And because he had installed a password manager, he never actually couldn't log into the person's account. He could see them typing on like Bank of America, but couldn't actually get the actual passwords out of the password manager from his own machine that was stolen. And so, there's some pretty funny stuff. But he has I'll have to find it and see if we can link it in the Discord, but he has a whole blog chronicling basically tracking his own hardware. I think he ultimately got it back, but the guy slipped up. But it was like a year of like stalking this guy that stole his own laptop and trying to figure out who he was.
Right. That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, we've got password managers. That's great. I think passwords are definitely probably the first point of entry, right, for security.
Yeah.
We try to use these password managers to collect all of our personal passwords and whatnot. And then also, share them with our staff. That's another thing is like, what are some best practices, I guess, with like employees, like sharing information, either logins or what? I feel like there's a lot of that kind of stuff happening where we probably shouldn't be doing that, but I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I don't share my Netflix login. I don't know what you're talking about. Disney Plus is a different story, but no. So a lot of these password managers will have a business account for storing, secure notes, secure logins. But anytime you're kind of sharing a login to a lot of those systems, a lot of systems like Twitter, for example, they have this premise of teams where you can actually share that stuff. One of the biggest problems you run into with sharing shared logins to things is what happens when that person leaves the company or any of these other things. Now you have to rotate the keys in some way and then reshare that with everybody. And so that's where that becomes really problematic. You should try to avoid your best to actually this, or not share the actual credentials, but share access to something that could then be revoked. It's also really interesting too is some of these challenges that make things more secure also make it harder to share a lot of that data. So in security, there's kind of three main pillars. There's something there's something you are, and then there's something you have, right? And so a YubiKey or a physical, key that you have is something you have. Something is your password, and something you are is biometric fingerprint, eyes, those things like that. Right. And so, but by introducing those other things, you're now potentially locking out your coworker from building a lot of this stuff. And so a lot of the 2FA style stuff actually have the one-time password type things. are also in the like LastPass will have access to allow you to do some of that stuff. And so there's ways around it, but again, it's a scale, right? You're either really secure or you have to become less secure for convenience.
Right.
And so that's like using the same password and a bunch of stuff is more convenient, but it also is less secure.
So I would say you should have like a corporate email address for accounts, so the company always owns it and it's easier than to share the passwords. That's one. So if somebody leaves the team, you don't have to figure out which email address was associated with the Twitter account or the Amazon
Right.
account. It's the admin account and you all have access to it. That's one. Two, if and when you need to share your email and the password, split it up, right? An email, like you want to share the login information, you send it through email, you might send the passcode through in my world, it's WhatsApp or iMessage or some other, you separate the information into two different mediums. Now, it's still risky. You're still being, it's a risk, but it's less risky than if you sent an email or share it in Google Drive. Don't create an Excel file in Google Drive and share it, because that's also really risky to do. And a lot of people do that. You think it's safe. It's in Google. You have your two-factor authentication set up on your Google, but still, that is not where you want to be storing your information like that. So.
Right.
Yeah. I was just gonna kind of underscore some of the things that Nate was talking about with the multi-factor authentication. I think MFA or 2FA or one-time passwords, these kind of two separate elements that you need to get in somewhere. I think we experience a lot of employee turnover from an intern perspective, not a full-time employee thing, but we do have a lot of services that we need to give access to. And what Nate was saying is it's really difficult to rotate all those passwords every time somebody leaves an organization, because they could literally look at the password, write it down, and then access it. One thing that makes it a little bit easier and allows you to do that less frequently is a second factor. So it's really nice in 1Password, for instance, when you have the one-time password in there, it's automatically entered into your browser after you sign in with your password, but it also is a way, because it's temporary in nature, the day after an intern leaves and you forget to rotate the password, at least you're protected there. And we mandate that on your email too, just across the board, as kind of a good practice. So whenever you can do that, it feels like a pretty good look. And the password managers, if you can do like the Google Authenticator or that style of temporary one-time passwords, it's pretty nice.
Right on. Yeah, I think in a previous conversation we had too, Franklin, you brought up a good point about personal information, PII, and that there might be some instances where we may be sharing, as an organization or labels or even artist managers might be sharing a little bit too much information sometimes, or just coordinating booking, things like that, right? Where do we see like other, vulnerabilities like that within, the music space?
Oh man. If you're storing W-9s in a Google Drive, please stop doing that.
Why?
Oh, just social security numbers and stuff like that. Like, I've seen so many indie labels that have literal Excel spreadsheets with literal social security numbers listed just in these things. Social security numbers, home address, full legal name, bank account details, all this other stuff.
All of the questions you're going to be asked when you try to access something else, and the hacker needs that background information. This information is going to give them that access that you don't want to give.
If someone was to call my bank, these are the questions that they're going to be asking to get access to it. And so, there are obviously, like, I'm sure most people here are familiar with Stripe. So one of the best ways to architect an application or the way you're doing business is this whole genre of stuff is called PCI compliant. So the way you actually manage PII, personally identifiable information, there's a lot of laws and rules and compliance that you have to do to be able, with all the world's governments, to be PCI compliant. And so by offloading the work for that, so what we use internally is a company called Trolley. And they handle, everything comes to us as as anonymous IDs.
Right.
So it's non-reversible IDs that we see everything. So when we're like, we need to pay this recipient this ID, we pay it. But them filling out their tax documents, giving their bank account information, that's all handled by Trolley and not by us.
Right.
So we actually shift it over, we shift the PSAG compliance to them, who literally, that's all that company does,
Right.
is make sure that they are securing this data in the right way.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think we haven't taken steps that far to kind of go and do tokenization of these pieces of key information. We have taken some steps though to, one thing that I think is very important is just keeping things out of email. Like an email attachment is there forever, and then if your email gets compromised, then it's there typically. So when we're sharing, a couple things, like one, Google Workspace, which we use as they actually have auditing functionality if you pay for a certain tier to let you know which documents are shared outside your organization that potentially have PII in them. So there are these kind of auditing techniques out there that can help you potentially reverse anything that has been done to date. And going forward, certainly on like from a PII sharing perspective, we'll try and do something like create guest vaults in our password manager so that folks can create an account, then upload what they need to upload, and then nothing is kind of exchanged via email, and it's secure. Also, one thing that I've started to do with even things that are less sensitive is just use file transferring services. So like Dropbox Transfer, for instance, with an expiring link. So I'll say, I'm sending you this, here's this link. If my email gets compromised or your email gets compromised, it's going to explode in a week anyway, so chances are nobody can access what is the contents there. So things to think about, depending, again, it's like the spectrum that you were talking about, which is like usability versus security. You always got to choose like where you're going to go, because if it's too hard to use, people will just find a way to work around it.
Right.
I want to make a point that like we all think we're also not going to get hacked or not important enough to get hacked. And the hackers aren't thinking about you or me. They're throwing shit at the wall and hoping it's going to stick, and they're going to grab some information. And so you are vulnerable at all times just because they're trying new ways to get information and get access to accounts to do whatever it is they're planning to do. And so you're just going to be caught in the net. It's not about you. It's about them.
It's a volume-based game,
Yeah.
right? So if they can, cast a net out and get, 3 dozen hits, that's the same thing with like using the same password in a bunch of other places. If your site is compromised, now they have an email and password combination. They're going to go try this on all the other websites and see, it's like, oh, can I actually log into this system with this? And so if you just happen to have, and we're seeing this with everything. Dropbox has been hacked. Adobe's been hacked, so if you have Creative Suite.
Coachella.
Yeah, all of them. Yeah. And so I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but there's actually a really good SecOps guy who actually categorizes all all of the leaks that have
Have
occurred.
I Been Pawned?
Have I been pwned? That's the one.
Troy Hunt.
Troy Hunt, thank you. That one's actually a really cool tool that he provides, where you can actually go and put your email in, and then it doesn't tell you your password, but it tells you how many, so he actually has you, it's smart that he does this, but he has you verify your domain name. So if you have like your own domain name that have your own emails, you can actually put you have to put a thing on your domain name to prove that you own it. So you have to put a record in. And then once you do that, then it'll actually tell you every single one of the emails that have your domain name that have been compromised in all of these leaks. And so that you can kind of see.
Yeah.
There are also some free services that used to be out there when all of this, the big dumps were happening back in like 2007, 8, 9 were happening, like around the time of Sony. When Sony got hacked,
Right.
They had some sites that were out there that were free that you could put your domain in or your email and you could take a look and keep track of it, and it was
Have I
quite
Been
terrifying.
Pwned is a good one. It's Have I Been PWNED.
Yeah.
And it's kind of egregious. You go and you type in your personal email
Yeah.
and it's secure. Like they're just looking at your email. You're not typing in any sensitive information. You can type in anybody's email and you can see how many times they've shown up in dark web dumps of data, et cetera.
Yeah.
It's
Like, take a look at your parents.
Right.
You'll
Keep
see.
an eye on your parents. too.
Parents are a very interesting security vector.
Right. Right. So, okay. So we've been covering a lot on passwords. A lot of security vulnerabilities in that field. However, there's new fields popping up nowadays. You know, we have Web3 popping up. There's all sorts of like NFT scams going on. What are some I guess more interesting scenarios that have come up? I guess recently.
We were talking about this before we kind of came in. So the fascinating thing about blockchain, Web3, NFT, crypto space in general is the whole premise of this market is a trustless, decentralized system. So what's fascinating about this is everything that happens is public, right? So long ago, there was a Bitfinex had a heist where they lost $4.6 billion. And just recently, the culprits of that were just prosecuted because they basically had sat on it for 4 years. But everybody was watching this wallet, and then all of a sudden it starts getting laundered and moved and fractionalized and all this other stuff. But a bunch of sleuths who've been watching this follow it because it's all public. And so what's really fascinating about just Web3 and all this other stuff is that most of these things that are happening are not, everything that's happening is computers are executing the rules that they're given. And so every bug that gets found essentially is completely incentivized for someone to steal your stuff. And the thing is if you steal someone's Bored Ape, it's yours now. Technically, it's yours. It belongs in your wallet. And so
Reply All had a great podcast about some woman who bought an NFT that was a Bieber bunny thing. I don't know what it was. And she bought it, and then it went up in value, and all of a sudden somehow she clicked a link thinking it was an airdrop or something, and it got stolen, and then she tracked it and she watched it, and finally it was sold to somebody, and she reached that person. She could figure out who it was off the Web3 space, and that person was like, I own it, and it's worth. It went up from like $800 to like $36,000, and it was just the pain of losing it versus the monetary money. So like
it's gotten crazy because like we were talking about this earlier. So there's the thing that's interesting about blockchain and wallets and this whole thing is that like it's like a bank account that anyone can deposit anything into at any time. And so we were talking about malicious NFTs, where if I go into my OpenSea and look at my wallet, I can literally airdrop anything into anyone else's account. And so there are literal NFTs out there right now where if I connect my OpenSea wallet, which is also a really bad thing to do, but if I connect my wallet to OpenSea and then I go look at my wallet through the OpenSea interface, there's malicious smart contracts that literally any interaction with the NFT is a virus that will then steal everything out of your wallet. And so if you're just looking at it like, well, wait, this is not my thing, it just appears, and you click the 3 dots in OpenSea and click delete, the moment you do that, it will go through and then it already is in your wallet, will go ahead and take everything out of your wallet and transfer it somewhere else. And so
there's gonna be a lot of cybersecurity companies building technology to prevent this and or to retrieve it.
Yeah, I mean, if there's no kind of like recourse to, because there's no centralized organization. I mean, what we're talking about today is even more important when you're managing your wallets and whatnot. I think the Bitfinex folks got popped because I think he had some private keys in like a Google Drive, and the feds basically hacked into his Google Drive or subpoenaed Google. I don't know. But like, these are the things that he was probably, I think he was like vocal on Twitter many years ago about like, don't be stupid when you're, when you're managing your own kind of private security. And that was kind of ironic.
Right.
I mean, I've seen, so there's cryptography is really interesting when you, like, it's the whole premise is that all this stuff is based off of everyone knows exactly how the rules work, but yet we can still trust each other with things because the math is so complex or so most things in security is how long will it take a supercomputer to kind of crack this? And if it's in the hundreds of millions of years of time for a supercomputer to crack it, that's good enough, right? Yeah. A determined person with enough horsepower can crack even normal cryptography, nowadays. So it's one of those things where it's like it keeps getting bigger and bigger. But what's really interesting about, I just lost my train of thought. It's gone. It's good.
That's all good.
Cryptography is a lot of numbers.
Yeah, right.
So I would circle back to the music
Yeah, go
space.
ahead.
You have to worry about ransomware, right?
Yeah.
What happens
Right.
if they come in and they're just, again, they're throwing a wide net out, trying to find an organization, and somebody, opened up an email, clicked a link, and the whole organization now is locked down. Do you have a backup of all the stuff that you need?
Right.
Can you re-access it again? Who are you going to turn to ask for help to deal with this? Do you have the funds, obviously, to pay the ransomware? Because if you don't have a backup, you need to pay that, or your business is gone.
Yeah.
Or insurance. Do you have an organization, or do you know the consultants who can help you reverse engineer the incident to understand where the vulnerabilities were, to patch that vulnerability, that hole in the organization for the future? These are important aspects to running your business, but you also have to have a team who understand this to begin with.
You bring up a really valid point of also just making sure you have backups of your stuff. Just not even just if you get compromised,
Yeah.
but just like if your computer goes down, right? I had a laptop die 2 weeks ago, and like I lost everything. Like generally I put most of my stuff in Dropbox, and Dropbox kind of auto syncs everything, which is a great way to kind of have backup. I can access it through the web. But the problem that I ran into is everything that was on my desktop that I just kind of threw stuff on, that's all gone. Like it's not there. So good backups that you can go through, or automated systems that will backing up to the cloud it's not as prohibitive as it used to be.
Right.
Like it used to be that it was just way too, like internet connections were not good enough and stuff. But now with everyone on, mostly fiber nowadays.
So it would be a good tool for the music space to back up their business and keep it running and be seamless. So you don't have to think about the backups. They're done automatically.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big fan of Box or Dropbox. I think stuff that, again, convenience, right? So if I have to remind somebody, hey, you have to go upload this stuff, I actually see a lot of labels using Google Drive to even share the files with everyone else. And so when an artist sends their music to the label, it ends up in Google Drive. It ends up in, sharing, like a guest upload type stuff, not just for sensitive stuff, but just the transfer of like, hey, I need your stems, I need your, and these things, we're going to send it to get mastered. And so there is some hygiene that needs to be done just to keep yourself organized.
Right.
But that's a mistake that once you've made that mistake once or twice, you remember to do that stuff because,
I'm a big fan of two backups. Offline, like on a hard drive that's not connected to the internet, as well as a Google Drive or a Dropbox or a box. Just because, for my personal life, like all the photographs or everything, it's backed up somewhere safe. Now, it can't connect anymore to my MacBook because the plugs have been activated. It hasn't changed. But I'll take it one step at a time. I know that it's safe somewhere else. And at some point, I'll find a vintage machine that will connect to it, and it'll be fine.
Yep.
But that's important.
Right. Well, we're coming up on about 15 minutes left here. Wanted to go ahead and open it up for any kind of Q&A questions anybody might have.
If anyone has any questions, raise your hand. With the mic out.
Questions, or we just tell war stories?
Yeah, we can kind of do both.
So this has all been super informative. I knew I had to be afraid of all this stuff, so you've reinforced that I'm not crazy. You're a small company. You're not going to be able to employ people like you guys to keep your fingers on the pulse of everything that's going on, everything from regular backups to the latest cyber threat. How would one go about? Are there companies that could that address the needs of small companies, and how would one go about finding those?
There are.
Yeah.
I have to think about it.
Right.
There are companies that deal with just your IT infrastructure. They are the people who need to make sure that they patch, which means they upgrade your software when there's new versions of it come out, because those usually have vulnerabilities which are important to fix and to close those gaps. They can also help you if something happens, and they can direct you to the right professionals. So I'm assuming that most organizations have a version of IT either in-house or externally, and if not, you should find a consultant who deals with IT who could help you. There are a lot of organizations who deal with security. Off the top of my head, I can't name them, but
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we're a small organization. We're roughly 40 people. We don't have IT. I mean,
You are.
I'm the closest thing to it. But what I do as a small organization, we're largely cloud-based. We don't have any sort of on-premise network that people are VPNing into. We don't we are basically distributed across a bunch of SaaS, software as a service businesses, Dropbox,
Right.
Google Workspace, Workplace, Box we use as well, Slack, Notion, all that good stuff. And so a lot of our security practices really do come down to, choosing the right service for our use case and being really good from a password management perspective. And then the administration perspective, you're likely doing it, or somebody in your organization is likely the administrator. There's a thing called, and maybe we can cull together some resources for doing some self-study on this stuff. But the big thing on the administration of these sites is the principle of least privilege, which is give people the least amount of access that they could potentially need, not because you don't trust them, but because if they were to be compromised, that would be an issue. So that would mean, read-only access when nobody needs edit access when people don't need to manage users, administrative access when they do, those types of things can really make a difference if you're a small org kind of running on not a ton of resources.
Yeah, I mean, I come from being a 1-2 person company, so I feel that. So where it comes down for me is most of the SaaS-based products. So G Suite is great. Microsoft 360 is fine. Any of those things that you get out of the box that kind of gives us. I know Heather has been using, I think, Asana, which kind of culminates all those into one interface. But you just can't do everything. You can't keep up with any of the stuff unless it's a passion thing, which is what it is for me. Yeah. But so for a lot of that kind of stuff, it's you have to lean on someone like a Google or that it's their business to make sure that you're taking care of a lot of that stuff. But mostly a lot of it just kind of comes down to common sense of just someone's giving me their social security number or their bank account details or any of these things. There's probably a better way to kind of deal with that than, that, or, it comes down to putting passwords on Post-it notes like my grandparents did. Not really a good thing to do generally. So password managers, like we talked about, LastPass, 1Password, Dashlane, there's a ton of them. They're all competing with each other for features. So they're all pretty much all the same features now, and they're secure. You've got your email, your calendar, your Drive, your Dropbox, all that other stuff is all kind of common. And then, like I said, if you're dealing with payouts, for a long time, we just used PayPal for everything. So PayPal was our payout system that had the added benefit for us at the time so that we didn't have to do 1099s at the end of the year, which is also a pain when you're a 1-person company. For bookkeeping, I used Xero for a long time, really like Xero. So, there's, what is it? It's Product Hunt. So something that actually might be really good is there's a thing called Product Hunt. And they basically collect a bunch of the different kind of things that I just named off as here's a thing, and they apply discounts to all of them. So I think you pay I don't know what the price is. It might be $1,500 that you pay for 1 year of Product Hunt, but then it comes with $1,000 off your first year of G Suite or all these other things. And so it's like one of those coupon books for fundraisers
used to
for
be
software.
Reddit. It used to be a Reddit or a Dig for products. Into that?
So it's one of their new products where you basically subscribe to their thing. It's meant for founders. I think the logo's a rocket ship or something, but it was one of those coupon books that you can basically get. And I think we ended up getting $20,000 worth of discounts for I think the $1,500 we paid for it. So that was really, really well done. Good trade.
No, I just want to point out that if you get SMSs, you should teach your colleagues that if you get SMSs or emails about payments of any sort, to double verify with accounts payable or management that it's really them asking for that money, and for the people who have to look at it to verify the bank account details match where you transferred your previous payments. Because that often, my horror stories are in that space right now, where I know a lot of people have been hacked by the senior management. CEO gets an email saying that, they didn't pay for their Salesforce, and then the CEO sends the email to somebody in accounts payable, not the person who's responsible for this specific account. And the person's like, CEO tells me I gotta follow, I gotta listen to what he does, what he asked for me. They didn't verify the bank account details, and they transferred, the year's worth of license to a fraudulent account. So that is really important to it's gonna happen all the time. That's a very easy way to make sure that the organization does not get hacked and spend money.
Yeah. Right.
Anyone?
What?
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. I was just gonna say, didn't look like we had any more questions. Oh, okay, yeah, sorry.
I think this is relevant. So a lot of labels and artists are definitely getting into the blockchain NFT spaces, and I know it's a little bit like the Wild West. So what are some best practices to protect your wallet, to protect your artists, protect your labels from some of the scams that are currently occurring?
So, oh man, in the crypto space, one of the best ways to, again, it comes down to convenience versus ease, right? So there's a concept of hot wallets versus cold wallets. And so there's actually, there's a tool out there called the Ledger, which is an actual hardware device that you can buy that is a cold wallet. And so one of the problems is if your wallet is not connected to OpenSea, then OpenSea can't transfer stuff out of your wallet because you have, it's not actually connected to the internet. So that's one of those things. It's really crazy what some of the people are doing.
But that's for like the serious money, the serious investors who are putting their money on this.
Right.
I mean, anybody watch Billionaire? Where he lost $3 billion.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a way to, if you're going to have serious money, to put it off, get it offline and make sure that it stays safe.
Yeah. So it's essentially having a cold wallet. What's crazy about it is like, the thing about cryptography is that it's huge strings of text that are basically being used to lock your stuff. And so what ends up happening is if you lose that key, you're just done. Like you don't get your stuff back. And so there is a really cool technique that you can use to recover your keys with a bunch of key phrases. And so it's generally like 8 key phrases. And so I've literally seen people etch their key phrases into a plate of steel.
Oh, shit. Yeah.
So that if there's a fire, and then put it in a fire safe to actually do it. So this is the extent that some people are going to like keep this stuff.
They must have some serious money on their wallets.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's like me who has I think I have like 12 Bitcoin somewhere on a hard drive somewhere that I mined a long time ago. But
I would say that you have to encourage that you follow the rules and best practices. If you're on a DAO or you're buying something and it says don't just click on any random links, don't do it out of FOMO, because that's what people are doing in the world of Web3. They're like, everybody's talking about it, I got to do it, I'm on Twitter, I see it, I got to click, and you're like, that's exactly how you're going to get hacked. That's one. And number 2 is you need to be familiar with what you have in your wallet, and if you are unfamiliar with something, don't touch it. Don't touch it. Raise a flag. Talk to OpenSea. Talk to somebody if you can, and then, just walk away.
The vector right now, the number one way people are actually getting hacked in crypto right now is through Discord.
Yeah.
So what's happening is Discord accounts are being compromised. So in a Discord channel, like the owners of the project generally have colored names and stuff. So when their accounts be compromised, generally, if you're in, let's say the Bored Ape Yacht Club's Discord, and then one of the project people actually post a link to something, generally they think it's safe to click it, but it turns out that moderator's account was compromised, and therefore it was a scam link and stuff. And so that's where a lot of the theft is happening.
Yeah.
Right.
Like you have to double verify. I would say you would want to go to other friends in the Discord and be like, okay, is this legit? But you have to have friends in the Discord as well, which is not always so simple. You got to make sure that everybody is legit and not fronting, which is also
everything's meant to be anonymous. Where it really comes down to, at least for me, for crypto, don't put anything in right now that you're not willing to lose, because you're gonna probably lose it. So
There's a good chance, at least.
So
All right.
Do we have any other questions? I actually have a question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Would you care to talk to us about your thoughts or the protocol if your backups are actually what are breached rather than like your main stuff.
I mean, there are organizations you got to find that will help you unlock those. I don't know the names of them off the top of my head, but I would not. Once your backups are hacked, you have to see if you can find a professional who can help you with that or deal with paying out for your insurance. I mean, do you have insurance to begin with for your life? I mean, a lot of people don't pay for cyber insurance. They don't think it's necessary. It's not a risk that's going to happen to them, and it can always happen, but you have to take that into account, like any insurance. But you'd have to turn to the serious professionals, and they're out there if you search for them.
You're saying like in like a ransomware situation, your backups and your main access is also compromised?
Well, I guess the kind of the more common situation is that they don't even touch the mains and go straight for the backups, and then I guess sometimes they do both. So I don't know. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on something like that.
Depends on how much.
I haven't found the backups that they've gone to the backups. They've usually gone to the front end of the organization. They're not. I mean, they try to get into the backups, but not always are they have access to that if it's offline.
Well, it's interesting. I think that's one of the things that, I don't know if it was a backup or so. I'm trying to remember. So Twitch had a huge security breach that happened last year. And that was the one where everyone's like, look how much money Twitch streamers are making. And then they like leaked all that data, but it included like their source code and all this other stuff. And the problem with that one was that that then became, someone put it on BitTorrent and stuff, and then it was just, I don't remember how big, it was like 300, 400 gigs or something of just raw compressed stuff that, it had just had everything in there. But that was not a backup. Well, I mean, it might have had some backups in it, but that was somebody who had access to an old AWS key that was in a file somewhere that someone got access to, and then it was an old contractor's AWS key that wasn't shut down. And then
Offboarding is critical to your organization. You stop working with employees and contractors, revoke access. You need to know that they have access. You need to revoke their access. And that's for any organization in the world. It is not specific to the music space.
Yeah, that's generally one of the biggest vectors that people attack through is compromised old accounts that no one's paying attention to.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point. I suppose if it was a situation where there was a lot of sensitive information in the backups, like in the Twitch scenario, then you might be in kind of a ransomware negotiation scenario if that's your only recourse. And there are firms that do that. They will negotiate down what is the ransomware piece. If it's a backup of data that you don't think is particularly sensitive and your main data source is not compromised, then you can just kind of say goodbye to that.
Generally, you may not even know, right? The thing is that like, if someone takes your backup and there's nothing that they're coming after you, you're probably not even going to know that they took it.
No.
Right. Unless you were monitoring your access patterns or something of those things. It's just kind of.
Yeah, those are only big organizations who are noticing that stuff.
Right.
Nobody's.
You kind of need a person who's dedicated to security.
You need a DevOps person or a security person or a SOC team, and that's going to be the big record labels who are going to deal with that.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
All right, have we got any other questions? Let's have a round of applause for our wonderful panelists,
Thank you so
please.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.